We are stronger together. It's okay to talk about how you feel inside. Shows the strength you have in you to make it all alright. Be ready to love, listen and link. After crisis or disaster, love, listen and link. Because we are stronger together.
This message is brought to you by the Pan American Health Organization and the Caribbean Development Bank.
Be ready to love, listen and link. After crisis or disaster, love, listen and link. Because we are stronger together. It's okay to talk.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Facebook Live discussion all about the Stronger Together campaign, where we are connecting to feel safe, calm, and hopeful. My name is Lisa Bailey, and I'm the Communications Coordinator for the PAHO Caribbean Office, and we are going to be talking all about this campaign today. And of course, we're going to be welcoming your questions, your opinions on the campaign, and we hope that you will, of course, get involved in the campaign and share the materials. And we're going to be talking about it with my panelists today, Dr. Elisa Prieto. She's advisor for NCDs and mental health with the PAHO Caribbean Office, based here in Barbados, as am I. And we also have Dr. Renato Oliveira. He is Unit Chief for Mental Health and Substance Abuse, based in Washington. And also based in Washington, Dr. Claudina Cayetano, advisor on mental health, also with the Pan American Health Organization. So we're here to answer your questions. We're here to share the campaign with you. And we want you to know that this is a partnership between the Pan American Health Organization and the Caribbean Development Bank. We've come together to put together these regional communication and awareness materials to promote mental well-being and positive coping strategies during not only the 2020 Caribbean hurricane season, but also the COVID-19 pandemic that we are all dealing with every day. Now, the campaign builds on the products that were created for the 2019 Stronger Together campaign, and we've incorporated specific tips and recommendations related to COVID-19. The call to action, connecting to feel safe, calm, and hopeful. I think it's definitely a good theme for now, because I don't know about you, but as soon as the hurricane season comes around, I start to get just a little bit anxious. And I don't know about you, but if you heard that theme just now, that's the jingle, it definitely makes me feel a lot better just listening to the music. So maybe we'll start with Dr. Renato Oliveira. Why do you think mental health and psychosocial support is so important at this time?
Thanks for the question, Lisa, and thanks for everybody who is attending this program. Well, I think it has never been so important. As you just mentioned, the hurricane season around, the COVID pandemic, so the life of everyone has really changed. And those changes many times are not positive and make us feel unwell. So look at some examples, some people that cannot see their relatives, some people who got sick and are afraid of being stigmatized, are afraid that the neighbors or the family members don't want to come close to them. In many places, the families are staying inside the house, so new stressors also arise. Kids are also not feeling comfortable. And many times we are also flooded by the information that is shown most of the time on TV and radio. And also, unfortunately, many people have lost family members. So all those stressors, they can accumulate on us. So and that's why this campaign is so important, because this campaign helps people to go through those difficulties in positive way. So that's what I mentioned at the beginning. I think mental health and psychosocial support has never been so important as now.
Thank you. Now, Elisa, maybe you can tell us a bit about the campaign. I've described it as your toddler because it was a baby last year. It's gotten a little older now. Maybe you can tell us a bit about the campaign and how it's progressed over the year.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. And I can totally relate to that because I'm a mom, not just to this campaign, but also to a real toddler. So I can certainly relate to the role. So we're really excited to be launching this campaign again in partnership with the Caribbean Development Bank. CDB has really been very supportive of this work, and it's something that I can't repeat enough. And we're really grateful for that collaboration. So as both you and Renata just mentioned, we are really trying to, through this campaign, offer tools and information to help communities with a special emphasis on vulnerable groups, but also essential workers, decision makers, and some particular groups like business owners who are being very much impacted by the economic consequences of the pandemic. We really want to offer tools to help them promote their mental well-being and positive coping strategies. And as you highlighted, I think the call to action of our campaign this year really articulates very well what we're trying to do. We know well that when people feel connected, when they feel safe, calm, hopeful, when they are able to access emotional, social support, physical support, when they are able to regain a sense of purpose and control by being able to help themselves, they do a lot better in the long term. So that is what we're trying to bring across with the communication products that we have developed and revised under this campaign. As you said very well, we're not starting from scratch. We're learning from the implementation of the Stronger Together campaign last year. And through those communication products, we're trying to convey the basic principles of psychological first aid, which is one of those tools. We have developed an illustrated booklet about PFA, or psychological first aid. We often refer to it as PFA. We have developed the radio jingle that you listened to at the start of this session, which is very happy. I think it puts a smile in our face and makes us want to dance. We have some audio public service announcements and a social media toolkit. The other big piece of this campaign is really trying to address stigma around seeking mental health and psychosocial support services, but also stigma around related to COVID-19. And we are hoping to do that by placing mental health at the center and at the front of conversations like the one we're having this afternoon. We really want this campaign to be a conversation starter, to be out there in social media, to be out there in our news, in our conversations. So we really break through that resistance that we sometimes find when it comes to sharing our emotions and talking about mental health. And that's one of the opportunities that I think the COVID-19 pandemic also brings for us. As Renato was saying, everybody is being affected in one way or other, right? In unprecedented ways. My kids are going to be screaming in the background, but yours probably are as well. So we can all relate to some of the distresses that we're going through. And that is also an opportunity to open up and speak and share. And we want our campaign to facilitate that.
I was going to say that just that in terms of COVID-19, definitely bringing mental health, I think, to the fore as something that everyone is paying attention to. Healthcare workers, we have sessions with journalists. Journalists are under unprecedented levels of stress as well. Perhaps we could go a little deeper into the PFA, Dr. Cayetano. Could you tell us about PFA, psychological first aid, and where it came from and how are we trying to apply it here in the Caribbean?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you very much for the question. I think it's important that we provide background information to what PFA is. As you know, PFA is, which is the acronym for psychological first aid. So I think people, when you say first aid, it's very familiar for everyone. We know what first aid is. But when you get psychological first aid, we tend to think of something that is so specialized, which is not. So PFA is a guide, that is a tool that was developed by WHO and other humanitarian agencies as part of the mental health and psychosocial support approach. So it's only one of the interventions of the MHPSS approaches. And this is because PFA is for effective response to people's mental health and well-being. It is important that we consider the MHPSS interventions because what it does is to provide for people to feel safe, connected to others, calm and hopeful, have access to social, physical and emotional support, and be able to help themselves as individuals and a community. As you know, it's the importance of taking care of your mental well-being, because if you're not clear, if you're stressed out, your thought and your thinking, your behavior gets affected. So PFA involves humane, supportive, practical help to fellow human beings who are suffering serious crisis events. So they have a framework in terms of the principles of PFA, which is part of the campaign that is quite catchy. And I'm so elated, every time we hear that, because it's definitely helping people to understand of the importance of PFAs. So we have the framework of look, listen, and link, which is the 3 frameworks for the PFA. I also want to mention that this is a skills that is not only for mental health providers by no means. This is a skills for people who are, particularly who are not mental health providers.
So anyone can do it, yeah?
Frontline workers. And when we say frontline workers, we're talking about social workers, ambulance driver, we're talking about pharmacists, essential service like shop workers, like food distribution. You mentioned the journalists, even law enforcement, civil servants. So the idea here is that they have these basic skills, and at the same time, we want to make sure that they have the skills to be able to refer. And that's, I'm sure my colleague Elisa will remind me of the important. We are not just building skills for them to do everything. It's for them to know what to do and what not to do, how to refer when it's behind, when it's there is something.
So people are listening, and they're listening to this framework. It sounds almost academic, but we have this PFA booklet. So are you saying anyone can read this booklet and have an understanding of how to apply the themes? And we already have a question. Someone wants to know, how can you get trained in PFA?
Okay, so initially when we started talking about PFA, we used to do training, face-to-face training with, as I say, frontline providers. We used to do face-to-face training with non-mental health providers. But now we realize that this is a tool that people can actually access through the PAHO virtual campus. So if they go to PAHO, perhaps we can include there in the chat the webpage for the PAHO website. We also have the online course for PFA. We recommend that when they're doing the PFA, we don't, although we're saying for, it's open, is for frontline workers, it's always good to do it in the right manner. Why? Because it's about causing no harm. It's about protecting mental health. It's about preserving mental health. Misinformation can cause more anxiety and can cause more fear. So it's very important that it's done. There's guidelines for training materials, guidelines for field workers. So we always recommend that it's being done in that manner. So we have a virtual course. We have it in Spanish. We have it in English. Thanks again to the to this collaboration we have with CDB. So I think we have the course in English. We are working on adapting the course, and I say we, but actually with Elisa, working in adapting the course to the situation with COVID as we speak.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to Taraline for giving us that question. If you're just joining us, we are talking about the Stronger Together campaign. It's a campaign that brings mental health to the fore as we address not only COVID-19, but the hurricane season, a reality here for us in the Caribbean. Now, we touched a little bit, and feel free to ask any questions that you'd like to ask, and we will put them on to our panelists here. Dr. Oliveira, we touched a little bit on stigma. I know you spend a little time in the Caribbean, and I can definitely relate to what I hear people saying. Stigma is a big problem worldwide, but I know it is also a big problem in the Caribbean as it relates to mental health. Could you talk a bit more about stigma and the objective of the campaign in that relation, as it relates to that?
Yeah, thanks for this question, Lisa. I think you touched a very important topic. Because unfortunately, stigma has been very close to mental health issues, to mental health conditions for many, many years. And the same happens now also with stigma attached to COVID. And the big problem with the stigma is that people who face those situations, people who face mental health difficulties, and they, because of stigma, because of the fear that the others will talk about them, that the others will undermine them, they don't look for help. So when they need the most, they are not able to find someone that can support them, because it is as if they are blocked to go for that support, with the fear of being identified, of being blamed, I think all of us have also gone through these situations in our lives, or we know a family member or a friend who was facing a big problem, or who was facing a challenge in life, and started to feel sad, lost concentration. And many times when we feel like this, we could think that, well, no one would be able to help me, or maybe my friends and my relatives might think that I'm weak. And in fact, this is what undermines the possibility to search for help, to talk to someone who might be able to listen and provide the principles of psychological first aid, as Claudina has just mentioned, or to go for a health professional, a counselor that could also be able to advise you and help you with some simple techniques to overcome the difficult situation that you are facing. So, and that's again the plus of this campaign, because one of the objectives of the campaign is also to pass the right information about mental health to the population in a way that with the right information, stigma is combated. We are able to help people to understand that the stigma being a barrier, it blocks our capacity to overcome the difficulties and to search for help. And maybe I can also add that as part of the work that we are doing, we are working with journalists, because journalists play a major role in combating stigma, in passing the right and the correct information to the population. And also using passing information on mental health and psychosocial support in a way that this topic is normalized. It should be normalized because it's part of our life. All of us go through difficult times. So it's an important work that we are also doing, is to inform the journalists, and we also run workshops in a way that stigma is reduced and people are able to search and get help when they need the most.
Thank you. And the questions are showing us that this is applicable to so many different target groups. We have a question from Lynette Taylor, and she's asking if PFA is useful for HR or communications professionals in the workplace who deal with employees who may be going through various emotional crises. Anyone can answer that one.
I can go with that one. I think I definitely want to encourage that shop owners, human resources, supervisors guarantee that they can learn about psychological first aid, because here what we're talking about is that we want to make sure that people pay extra attention to their mental well-being. That's our responsibility, I think, to be able to do that. So I would recommend that it's not, we're saying it's for, when we say frontliners, when we say people in position of providing help, and even for our own mental well-being, it is definitely important. So we encourage them to do that.
Okay, Elisa, maybe you'd like to talk a bit more about the vulnerable groups, because I know we've made a big effort to also now include closed captioning. We're trying to have sign language. Maybe you could talk a bit about the vulnerable groups, but also the other target groups that we can target with this campaign.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. No, certainly, as I mentioned at the start, one of the guiding principles of this campaign has been to place a focus on vulnerable groups that we know are at greater risk in a public health emergency during the COVID-19 pandemic and may need special care. So we know some of these groups are children and adolescents, or older adults and their caregivers, persons with pre-existing conditions, and that's broad. It includes people living with non-communicable diseases, mental health conditions, substance use disorders, people with disabilities. There are many different groups that may require that special care and attention during difficult times. And I think maybe, if you allow me, the best way to show how we're trying to do this through the campaign is to share a little bit about the illustrated booklet. So if I...
And that would be good, because we do have a comment about men being a difficult group to reach. So make sure you show them the ones for men.
Okay, I think that's right where I was going. So quickly share my screen. And as I mentioned before, excuse me, the booklet covers the basic principles of psychological first aid that Claudina mentioned. So it goes through look, listen, and link, 3 different sections. after introducing the idea of PFA and why PFA is important, and then has this final section called special care. Special care, which integrates some of the messages around vulnerable groups, but also about gender roles, different roles, different norms around men and women that can impact the way men and women have different vulnerabilities when it comes to a public health emergency, health-seeking behaviors, etc. So this is just an example of some of those key messages that we want to direct towards men and women. One big piece that we have added this year to the campaign is around violence. We know that the risk of domestic violence and other forms of violence is increased during public health emergencies. And this is particularly true during the COVID-19 crisis, when many of us have been spending extended periods of time at home because of lockdown measures. And that has definitely put a lot of people in difficult situations. So one core message that we want to bring across is that violence is never justified, not even during a crisis, not even during an emergency. Everybody has the right to feel safe at home. And through this campaign, we're trying to offer some tips for what communities can do, for what persons who may be experiencing or be at risk of domestic violence can do to help or to feel safer. Another group that I mentioned, and I think came already up in our conversation, is children and adolescents. Children and adolescents are particularly vulnerable during crisis situations. And here we want to share some of the distress reactions that children and adolescents can have. And this speaks to what Renato was just saying. We need to be able to understand that certain reactions are to be expected during a crisis situation. And we need to find ways to deal with it. And I think this is especially true when it comes to children and adolescents.
Different target groups react in different ways. So you wouldn't expect a child to react in the same way a man would or a woman would.
Exactly. School age, and even within childhood, the different ages, different reactions that you may expect. But definitely, I think most of us with kids at home are really experiencing the challenges of, homeschooling, having to work from home in some cases, or those who unfortunately have lost their jobs, the uncertainty that comes with not knowing what is going to be happening economically. So we also thought it was relevant to include some tips for parents. And here in particular, I'm highlighting some tips to keep it positive. And I think this is good for the family as a whole, and some tips to manage bad behavior. And as I mentioned before, we also acknowledge that people with pre-existing conditions and disabilities are a vulnerable group. And I think in particular, for people with disabilities, the pandemic has really brought a lot of challenges. And it's very relevant that we make explicit effort to make sure that our positive messages, our messages around mental health, can be reached by everybody, right? So that people with disabilities don't feel left behind. And we are really trying within our limitations to bring that to our campaign. For the booklet and the social media packages, we are right now working on alt text to increase and enhance accessibility for people who are using screen readers. We are developing, as we speak, an audio version of the booklet. And we are trying to, as much as we can, bring closed captioning and sign language interpretation to our events. Unfortunately, today we were not able to have these services, but we were able to provide them for the launch of the campaign. So we are really trying to make that explicit effort to leave no one behind through the key messages of the communication products, and also by enhancing access of what we work on.
Thank you. Are there any others you wanted to share, or can we? Okay, that's it. In terms of those tips, Claudina, could you maybe give us some of those tips, maybe breaking them down by some of the groups? We saw some of them graphically just now, but are there some tips that maybe you can give? I don't want to give you a particular target group, but healthcare workers are coming to mind. Persons with NCDs, with COVID being such an issue for them. Would you like to give a couple tips for certain target groups?
And one of the things that is also important, Lisa, thanks for asking the question, is that when we say PFA, remember psychological first aid, I want to make sure that people do not confuse that with counseling. Counseling is totally different. So counseling is a technical tool. It's different in the sense that it's a clinical intervention, and you need to be a special, you need to do training. That's where you have to have some information certificate or diploma or something in counseling. So this is not counseling. Just make sure that we have that information clear, so that people don't feel like, oh, I'm doing counseling now. No, by no means. When we're talking about PFA, we know that who can benefit from PFA, and we say who can benefit, just like, children, adolescents can benefit, people who are experiencing, conditions like maybe like worried about COVID, or they're having chronic illness. We're talking about people who are just worried even about the quarantine, the travel restrictions. Currently, we have shelter, when it comes to the hurricane in the Caribbean, we tend to do training for shelter managers, for community health workers, so they can benefit from learning the skills of PFA. And when that is done, so we also talk about who can do that, when and where. So when it's first response to help someone who is distressed, a first response to help people to feel calmer, to feel to regain their capacity to cope and to make decisions that are informed decisions. So we have the other MHPSS interventions, that, as I said, it's only one part of that, but PFA, it is for people for the first response. So where that can happen, maybe could be provided by, people who are frontline workers. If it can also be done by remotely. So we want to make sure that the important thing is the basic principles of any type of essential psychosocial care or support, even for PFA, is that we think about, respect for safety, for dignity, and rights to anyone that you're helping. So for us, it's very important that, we pay more attention to the respect, to the safety, to the dignity of the people that you're providing support to.
I think we have time to go into the look, the listen, and the link a little bit. The booklet outlines it really well, but if you could just maybe between yourself and Dr. Prieto outline, what do you mean by look? If it's someone who is, I don't know, not dealing with the COVID-19 situation well, what is the first step? Take me through the steps for a person if I'm dealing with someone who I think may be in distress.
Okay, so it's important to understand that if you want to provide support to someone, you don't want to make support to be intrusive. You want to be able to make it appropriate. So for that, you have to have good communication skills. You have to be able to listen. So you want to be able, if we're talking about listening, we know that in the moment of people, when they're distressed, when they're very anxious, their listening is short. So we want to make sure that we know how to listen, and the listening is just listening with your ears, but actually listening with your eyes. And so it's so important to do that, because listening, look. So you want to look if the person is in a particular distress. There's something much more than you can offer to that person at that moment. So this is why these principles, we spend a lot of times when we're doing the training and when you go through the material into what exactly you need to be looking for. Because it's also, when we say look, we're not looking at the person, we're looking at your surroundings, whether it's safe for you, whether it's safe to provide support. And then the link is that understanding of what are the services, if there is any services that are required. So it's those are the things that are relevant, that you want to be there to provide that sound support to someone, as I mentioned before, to be able to regain the capacity to make decisions. Not that you're going to make decisions for them, but that because you're going to be there to support them in making an informed decision. So once you go through these three principles, listen, look, and link, it helps you to do it in a more informed way. So I'm sure I want to leave it right here, so to give more, because I think both of us, we have been working in this with the booklet. Perhaps, Elisa, you may want to add more to that.
Sure. No, I think you've outlined the basic concepts of each of the pieces, right? The look, as you said, not just look in terms of the person that you're going to be offering support, but looking for your surroundings, your safety first. That's like the motto, right? You need to be sure that you're entering a crisis situation and that you are not going to be suffering any harms. Look for life-threatening conditions. So that's another important piece, ensuring that you get the medical attention that may be needed, etc. Look for basic needs, food, shelter, water, basic things that people may need. And I think a very important piece of look that maybe I want to emphasize, and that has come up through the conversation, is being able to distinguish distress reactions that are expected from distress reactions that require a referral, that need other type of help. No, I think Claudina right now emphasized the idea that this is not counseling and this is not the only tool available. We always say there's many different layers of mental health and psychosocial support that need to be in place. And this is just one piece. So it's very important to be able to identify which are the situations where you need to seek further help or refer. Right? Situations, distress reactions that interfere with normal functioning or that last very long in time, more than 1 month. So those are some of the things that we have tried to highlight in the booklet in a very visual and easy to understand way, which are some of the things that need to trigger that type of looking for further support. Then the listen, I just want to add to what Claudina was said, that in the booklet, we have integrated some tips about remote communication. Even if you're not face-to-face with the person because of the current COVID-19 situation and the restrictions that come with it, there's still a lot that still can happen, even in terms of body language, because right now we're seeing each other, right? We have all this technology, wonderful technology that is helping us stay connected, even if we need to be physically apart. So there are some very specific tips around that type of, remote communication. And then lastly, for the link piece, I want to emphasize that we have made emphasis this year around managing this near constant stream of news. And I think that applies not just to COVID-19, but also to the hurricane season. The minute we have a storm coming up or a country affected by a hurricane, that is all we see. And that can trigger anxiety, can trigger distress reactions. And we want to be able to manage news in a way that they help us plan and they help us stay safe, but not make us feel overwhelmed. And in that line, we also included some tips around keeping teens, children and teenagers safe online. I think that's something that we're all suffering, having our kids doing more screen time than they usually do. So, in that part around sharing information and the importance of sharing information, we also felt it was very relevant to add some tips to make sure we pay attention to that particular issue. So those are the things that I would add.
I want to add one more thing, because I think probably we mentioned in the part of the look, that you want to, and Elisa brought that well in terms of look and identify people that are likely to need special attention. So I think that's we did. When the listening part, and Renato, perhaps you can come in here too, because PFA came as a result of initially, how in medicine everything changes? So before we used to do debriefing. So debriefing means that we bring everyone together. We think people have to be talking about all these traumatic events. That is just causing more trauma. And I think it's important to know that debriefing, we do no longer recommend debriefing. This is why we have the PFA. So in the listen, we want to make sure we explain to people that while, that we want to learn how to communicate, we explain to them that we are there to support. We do not want to force them to be, because how in the Caribbean, sometimes people think, get it out of your system, talk about it. No, this is not forcing people. So this came at that part. And as I said, I don't know if you, Renato, perhaps you can also bring that point in terms of we no longer recommend debriefing. This is why we have psychological first aid.
Yeah, that's very important what you're saying, Claudina. And I think one of the words that you use for me explains it in the best way. It's a non-intrusive listening. It's the capacity to be there with someone who is in distress, to be there for that person in a way that you're not intrusive, you don't interfere, you're there to receive, you're there to accommodate, you're there to understand what the person needs, and if necessary, if it's out of your capacity, to refer to a service that could also be supportive to the person. And there is something else that I also wanted to say, because for me, it's one of the essences of this campaign called Stronger Together, which is the necessity and the importance of us humans to connect. I mean, during this pandemic, many of us have been obliged to not to be close to the ones that we love the most. The people that work with me, I cannot be close to them. And this is very hard for us humans. So we need to be able in the situation that we are facing now in order to be stronger together. And to be stronger together, we need to connect the way that we can, through virtual means, through all the types of communication that we have. And this is what I also wanted to share with the listeners. If there is someone who is quiet, isolated, well, why not reaching that person? Send a message, reach through any technological means, just and offer yourself the principles of psychological first aid. Offer to listen, offer to understand what the person is going through, and maybe the person recovers just by having that opportunity to share what the person is going through. The connectedness is one of the most important things for me at this moment that you're facing now.
That's true. We do have a question if you can download the booklet. Yes, the booklet is available. We will share the link for the page that all of the materials are available there. We will be adding some materials as we go on. And before we leave, I'll let Elisa tell you again what we have and what is going to be coming soon. And also to mention that if you are interested in doing the course in PFA, it is available on the virtual campus, the PAHO virtual campus, and it's very easy to register. So please feel free to go on there. We only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to get into some of the negative coping mechanisms that some people may use. I know the booklet does touch on some of these. You know, alcohol is one, as you are also substance abuse. Dr. Oliveira, maybe you can also talk about some of the things that we don't promote that people do during this time.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. This is very important what you're saying now. In those difficult situations that we are all facing now, some people would try to appeal to alcohol or to drugs, thinking that these substances could reduce their anxiety, reduce their suffering, or maybe help the person to overcome some depressive feelings like sadness, difficulties to sleep. And in fact, that's not the case. I mean, alcohol and substances can really make the mental health of the person deteriorate. Alcohol and other substances can cause dependence, which can make it very difficult for the person to stop in a later stage. We also know that alcohol and substances can precipitate situations of violence, and which is a very serious problems that, as Elisa mentioned before, should not be tolerated. And on top of that, alcohol also reduces the capacity of our organism to face diseases like viral infections or bacterial infections, which is so important today with the COVID-19. So we really don't recommend that people use alcohol or drugs. What we recommend is that people take this opportunity to try to reduce, stop, look for a professional that might be able also to help the person to reduce or stop the use of alcohol and drugs. This is a very important recommendation that I wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much. And I must mention that the training course is also available in Spanish. We did say that before, but just to say, we also have a couple people from Spanish-speaking countries on the Facebook Live. So thank you for joining us. And yes, you can also join the course in Spanish. We also have someone watching us from South Africa and other Caribbean islands. So thank you for all of you who have joined. Elisa, if you want to just go through what we have available so far and some of the other materials that will be coming on stream soon.
Sure, will do. And again, I'm going to share my screen real quick so that I can share with participants what the campaign looks like. And the campaign right now has some of the communication products. So you will find the booklet, which you can download. I know this was asked before. You will find social media cards, a total of 30 social media cards, which we have divided into 10 themes. And we are recommending that you use 3 cards per theme weekly. So we rotate the messages, and that is all explained and proposed in the Stronger Together social media kit that you can also download from the webpage. You will find the radio jingle, and you will see there's a full version, 2 short versions, and an only music version. We also have some public service announcements, and we will be producing some new PSAs, so stay tuned because there's more coming. Here you will find a description of the campaign, what we're trying to achieve, who we are targeting, some key concepts and definitions, the key principles of PFA, and here you click and you will get more information. And our key messages. Similarly, you click and get a little bit more detail. Here is the full list of the social media cards, which are based on the illustrated booklets. And we will be producing an audio version of the booklet and human interest stories, focusing on the vulnerable groups that I highlighted before. So we will probably be organizing some events when we have this material ready to share with you and you know, to bring back your attention to our campaign. So stay tuned, check out our website, use the materials, disseminate the materials. We really want you to own the materials so you can help us spread the word.
Thank you, Elisa. Any final words from you, Dr. Cayetano?
Of course, thank you very much. And thanks, Elisa, for all the work that you're doing and for making sure that we put mental health on the agenda. I think it's definitely important. Everyone must pay extra attention, I think, to their own well-being and to the well-being of others. And if you have a staff, to the well-being of your staff. If you have volunteers, well-being of your volunteers. Ensuring well-being is not a luxury. It's a necessity, it's a responsibility, actually, because we need to make sure that we protect the physical and the mental well-being. We protect our mental well-being and the mental well-being of others, of our family. I think it's important, and Renato mentioned it at the beginning, that it's our responsibility to, you know, to make sure that we minimize the stigma and discrimination so that people do not have to suffer in silence, so that people could feel comfortable to look for help when they needed to. So I think this has been a great opportunity to be part of this this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudina. And Dr. Oliveira?
No, I just would like to thank you for organizing this chat, this opportunity. I'm a fan of this campaign, and I hope I'll be able to join some of its activities. So congratulations for that.
Thank you so much. And it was wonderful being here with you once again. Thank you to my panelists today, Dr. Elisa Prieto, Dr. Renato Oliveira, and Dr. Claudina Cayetano. We also want to thank our partners at the Caribbean Development Bank, all of our other partners and members of the media who we know have been sharing this campaign and will continue to share it for us, and all of you who asked questions and joined us here on Facebook Live and also on YouTube, on PAHO TV YouTube, for this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you will continue to be a part of the campaign. Remember, we are stronger together. Thank you and goodbye.